since my healthcare career in almost every industry I've been in. And I think one of the biggest tailwinds for us is really stopping and thinking about how technology and people, the brilliance of people and the brilliance of technology intersect. And I accidentally fell into the IT world about 15 years ago. What I learned very quickly as I think about tailwinds that really kind of push the organization forward, is those leaders who embraced new concepts were either early or mid adopters to really stop and think about and entertain the what ifs. Their progress went much further.
Welcome to the Chad Carden Podcast, where people and culture make all the difference. Our guests are real leaders that are making real impact by creating even better cultures and even better results. We're going to talk about things that most people aren't talking about. We're going to talk about things that leaders are thinking but might be scared to say. We're going to get into issues that can give you practical and tactical ways to set you up for a higher probability of success. Let's get after it. Welcome to another episode. I'm excited about today's guest, and I'll let her introduce herself in just a minute. But I had a chance to talk to Terri prior to the podcast, and a couple things I'm excited about that I think the listeners are really going to gain from this. One is just her rich experience in organizational improvement and how people really can drive cultures and how leaders can really impact individuals, teams, departments, and entire organizations. So I think that's one. The second thing I'm interested in is I think you're going to get a lot out of her journey. I think she is one, and again, she can tell you, but I think she is one that is always looking for ways to continuously make an impact on the world and herself. And so I'm interested to have this conversation. First of all, Terri, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chad. It's such a pleasure to be here as we are really kicking off this new year, halfway through the month, and looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, that's great. Why don't we kind of just start here? Just tell the audience and the listeners a little bit about you and your background, and even up to what you're doing now. I know you're sort of transitioning and you're opening up a new chapter, which we'll talk about, but just kind of give us some foundation.
Yep. So I was born the daughter of two teachers who ironically said, "I won't send you to school to be a teacher." And so it was an interesting journey to go to college and have my eyes open to the world, honestly, when I did that. But it really kind of paved the way to really spend time looking at options that I would have, knowing what my parents had carved out as not an option. I love to people watch, and that's one thing that I kind of picked up along the way and have now learned about myself even more so as I've gone through my career, through vacations. And so I've been watching people for a long time, and I think that also created a trajectory for me to study psychology, industrial organization, the study of work, as well as dip my foot in the world of social work. So I've had the opportunity to really study people from different walks of life, different venues. I actually did a full internship for a year in a prison, spent time on college campuses, and then stepped into corporate America, where I spent time with the American Express, as well as a major medical center in my region, a fast-moving consumer goods products company, and then Make-A-Wish, and now have really launched into my own business, which I've done a little bit of. But as I thought about my career and where I wanted to spend time, and even way back when I was in college, one of the things and North Stars that I had was really to work for myself. So have stepped into that world now and am loving it.
Yeah, I want to definitely talk about that because it is there's, I'm sure, a lot of emotions, a lot of things going through as you take the leap into, being in your own world and controlling your own destiny. And I admire that. I also am very aligned with you on people. I have myself I always say not for judgment or criticism, but I'm just curious with people and why they do the things they do and how they act. And I think it's a never ending game, right? We'll never get to the end of understanding that. But as you have watched and observed people, what are some of your key anchor points or takeaways to say, how do we interact and work with people to drive the results we want to drive or to create the environments we want to create? What are some of the elements? I know that, there's probably 100 things on the recipe list, but are there certain things that you've seen that just show up more often than others?
Yeah, so I think philosophically, there's a couple of areas I really use as my launching pad or my foundation. One is really listening and leaning in and understanding who the individual is. And that really leads to the concept of spending time one-on-one with the people I lead and or people that are core to moving the organization forward that I'm in contact with. It builds relationship, and I'm a firm believer that relationship is the foundation upon which work gets done. Because I think as you talk with people and as you work with people, if you can build a foundation of trust and relationship, when you get into that world of conflict, frustration, and rub, you have to go back and spend time figuring out the relationship. But if you do it while it's on sale, when you're not in that stage of conflict and frustration and or rub, then you've created that foundation to work through it. If you haven't created that foundation, then it's at a premium price because you have to step back and do some of that work or it explodes. So one-on-one time with people, it doesn't have to be hours, days, weeks, months. We're talking about really being intentional with your time, which then leads me to what I call the punctuated leader.
Okay.
And there's three simple components of it when you're spending time with individuals. Understanding that the period, the question mark, and the exclamation point are three ways to guide you through conversations and your leadership role. And that's whether you're leading as a parent, whether you're leading as a community member, or whether you're leading in a nonprofit world or a corporate environment. It transcends all worlds of life for me.
You got to walk me. I've had a lot of theories in leadership, but you got to walk me through this period, question mark, and
Yep.
exclamation point. Walk me through it a little bit. It sounds like an
Yep.
industry framework.
Yep. So the punctuated leader, the period from a punctuated leader perspective is all about telling people what the data is, the facts are, casting the vision, giving clarity. As Brene Brown says, one of my favorite authors, researchers, social workers who transcends all industries as well, she says, being clear is kind. So, as much information as you can give those that you're leading, those that you are working with on a day to day basis about yourself or about the work that you're doing is kind. So share with people the data and information that is there. The second component, which is the question mark, once you share, if you only share, then that's more of a dictatorship. We're looking at collaboration and connection. So really the question mark is truly about connection. So now that I've shared with you the data, the information, the vision, let's talk about the role you play in evolving that for yourself and or your teams if you're leaders of leaders, or if you're an individual contributor, how you're developing that for yourselves and others that you're working with. So really spending time leaning in on that one-on-one, asking questions, seeking to understand, seeking to understand people's visions and their talents and their skills and how they're going to connect it to the vision, and finding gaps if they exist, and helping them understand how to navigate the challenges. And finally, the exclamation point, it's really about celebrating successes, celebrating failures, which I actually call learning opportunities, and really evolving those into the work as people are working with you, through you, for you, however, whatever your relationship is. So it's really about understanding or transcending that word boss to leader to coach and utilizing the period, the question mark, and the exclamation point to really navigate your journey.
I like that. I think there's a lot of common themes in the way that we approach leadership, but I love the positioning and I love just the way that you can put it in sort of a picture and understand what the period, the question mark, and the exclamation, and how they all kind of thread together
Yes.
once you're building. Going back to your original statement, which is the relationship, which is really the starting point of everything, right? We always talk about like emotional bank accounts. You have to authentically and sincerely, you have to put in deposits, because there are times, like you mentioned, where we might have to make a withdrawal.
Yes.
And we don't want to be overdrawn in that relationship. And a lot of times, working relationships, from my experience, they're in a deficit. And now when I need to lean on that person, or I need to have those difficult conversations, there's just not enough in the tank to really allow us to move forward in a positive direction. It just creates more of a gap, as you mentioned earlier. So strong relationships, that trust is a must, and it's an ongoing journey, right? You can't just take it for granted.
Yes.
And then the
Yes.
second thing is being that punctuation leader. Is that right?
Punctuated leader. Yes.
Punctuated leader, which is the period, the question mark, and the exclamation point. That's awesome. Let's talk about, because again, the people game kind of fascinates me.
Yeah.
As you have always been this observer, as you always have been a learner of people and understanding how to, maximize those relationships. Not everybody thinks the way we think, right? There's some cynicism in the world. There's people that think what we do is fluff and it's BS and it never works. As you run into that, it's not about trying to convince anybody, but what are some things that you do to try to help people understand how the journey can be? It's nothing's easy in the world today, but it can be easier if we are walking with people versus kind of pushing against. What are some of the things that you've done or are doing just to help shift the mindset of how people look at this?
There's a story I tell, Chad. When I was in healthcare, um, I stepped in and out of HR and IT, which is a story all into itself. We can talk about that too. But while I was doing a jaunt in IT, I had the opportunity to meet with lots of physicians, neurosurgeons, brain surgeons, cardiologists, oncologists. And there was an oncologist that I got to spend some time with who was also working on his MBA. And we met before he started his MBA, and we talked, and we really naturally connected. And so after he started his MBA, we were at a reception, and he came over to me and he said, I've been meaning to catch up with you. And I said, okay, why? And so he says to me, I'm in this MBA program, and I had an epiphany that as I was sitting in some of your sessions and coachings with you, there is as much research and information about people, how they connect in the world, how they connect in the world of business and delivering whatever that is entrepreneurship, corporate, nonprofit. Healthcare. He said, I realize that there are volumes and volumes of information and research out there, almost as much as probably what we have on cancer research and cancer innovations. And so for him, there was a light bulb that there's a world of study, a whole world of study out there about people. And if that wasn't important, there wouldn't be as much in that realm as there is in cancer research. So for me, that really drove home to that individual. And I shared it with a lot of the folks I've worked with over the years that the study, the world of work, how we do things, places we spend time more than we spend time with our families often. If it's worth the research of investing for, researchers, organizations, whatever, then it's probably worth us as individuals investing some time in how we're showing up. And it goes back to intention, really being intentional about how we show up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's endless amounts of research of how this people game really can help set you up for success or create complete frustration and confusion. It's all depending on how you approach it, like anything else. You also mentioned something earlier, which I think I want to double click on, which is the space that you're in, the space that we're in with the people game. It transcends any industry, right? It transcends. It could be personal, professional, public, private. Nonprofit, whatever it might be. And so these things really do either show up in a good way or show up in a challenging way, or areas of opportunity or learning gaps, as you mentioned earlier. As you have went through the different verticals that you've experienced, and now you're launching off on your own, which is an exciting thing. What are some of those things that you see that are headwinds in this game that and a lot of times our wounds are self-inflicted, I say, right? Like sometimes I myself am my biggest headwind, but what are some of the things that are headwinds that you have worked with others to maybe eliminate or minimize? And then what are some of those things that are tailwinds? And I know we kind of talked about relationships and the leader, but what are some of those headwinds? What are some of those tailwinds that you've seen in the different spaces that you've lived in?
Yeah. I'm jotting a few notes because I don't want to forget
Yeah,
these.
no problem.
So what I would say, I may start and end with tailwinds, but tailwinds, as I think about flights and the analogy to, the tailwinds pushing you forward, I think a couple of things, and I don't think you can talk about leadership today without talking about technology. And I mentioned earlier that I stepped in and out of HR and IT when I was actually in since my healthcare career in almost every industry I've been in. And I think one of the biggest tailwinds for us is really stopping and thinking about how technology and people, the brilliance of people and the brilliance of technology intersect. And I accidentally fell into the IT world about 15 years ago. I had a IT leader ask me to come over and head the learning, the training, and the change management for a major electronic medical record system integration. Actually, it was an introduction, it was a launch. And we sunset 30 plus systems and rolled it into one. What I learned very quickly when as I think about tailwinds that really kind of push the organization forward is those leaders who embraced new concepts were either early or mid adopters to really stop and think about and entertain the what ifs. Their progress went much further. And, logically that makes sense, right? So if you're able to stop and really think about things prior to it really happening and really taking it, looking at it, not necessarily integrating it, but really trying to understand it, it's hugely important. So as we talk about change, as we talk about the technology integration in the world of work, leaders understanding it and wrapping their mind around it as quickly as possible so that then they can cast that vision, share the periods, so the information and the data, and then they can entertain those question marks has been hugely important as I've thought about the different systems and people brilliance interaction. So, from a tailwind perspective, as we look about today, and I read and hear the news, and there's so much threatening about people losing their jobs with
Yeah.
technology. I think when you look at the workforce today, we have more opportunity to really have an open mind, which is my second tailwind, to really move us forward if we're listening for understanding, for integration, particularly because it's going to happen. So it can happen to us or it can happen with us.
Okay, hold that point real quick because I think that's vital because I think a lot of people today look at technology and people as adversarial, right?
Yes,
It's
yes,
an either or, and what
yes,
you're saying is let's change the shift, the mindset, and look at it as an and.
yes,
How do we integrate and combine and marry the
yes,
technology with the brilliance of people,
yes.
and the people that are going to win in this space are the people that look at it that way versus seeing it as I'm either with them or I'm against them in this whole technology because like you said, it's here and it's not going away. And so how do we leverage it versus trying to fight against it? Love that. Love that. That's a great nugget. And I think if people can just shift that mindset, they're going to immediately put themselves in front of people that are trying to dig their heels in.
Absolutely. And it furthers the concept of a punctuated leader in that the conjunction of and should resonate. I really want that to resonate with leaders because as we think about the and, it then creates so many more options. My uncle used to say to me, Terry, you always have options. You always have options. It's the barriers of your mind that make you think that you may not have options. So as we think about the power of and, it goes to whole new highs from my perspective as it relates to integrating people and technology. And I think people need to understand what that looks like. So what that looks like for me is if I have a task force and or a team that's working on a new process or an acquisition of a system, we have to think about this as not taking what we were doing today and buying the system to make it work for what we're doing today. We have to look at the systems to really say, okay, what's our current process? So what's our as is? And then what's our to be? But what's between that, the journey between the as is to be, requires people across different experiences within your organization to sit together, to listen to each other, to take the technology into consideration, and then create the new to be and integrate the fact that, yep, a human intervention is not required here. But after this technological component happens, here's where it goes to the human to be either checked for quality, accuracy, how it will be utilized and or distributed, and then we will continue to evolve that. So it's really, I think process mapping is a huge component of that, and that we need to help people understand that we're creating new processes. And guess what? You get to be a part of that. And because you were a part of that in the training and creation, you then have prepared yourself to move into this new system process in maybe a different way, but you have prepared yourself to do that.
Yeah, I think another thing that I'm gathering from what you just explained was, which I really appreciated, as you're looking at the technology, and that's just the conversation at the topic right now, but a lot of things that you're saying, and again, if I'm putting words in your mouth, you got to let me know, but a lot of things you're saying is our own mindset and how we see things, right? And how we approach the things. And you mentioned the as is and the to be and what's in between. What I really like about what you said is as you're creating the new to be, let's just not just replace systems with the as is. If we're going to do that, let's just keep the old system, right? How do we create and leverage this to create something that's an entirely new page or chapter that's going to create benefits for everybody around as you're leveraging that? And I think that's so many times organizations just kind of stick in the as is, and they just try to layer on. Versus trying to create that new to be that is the next step or the next evolution in what they're trying to accomplish. And that's tough because a lot of people have a very fixed mindset, right? They don't really think about it that way. And that process mapping, like you were talking about, interesting. That I think that's if I'm a listener right now listening to this, I think one of the things I'm taking away is how am I challenging myself to be thinking about the to be. Right? And be thinking about that, not just the as is, because if it's just the as is, we don't need to change anything. Let's just live in the as is. But if we're going to the to be, how do we leverage that technology? And like you said, we might have to shift the chess pieces with people, but there's still value in the people and the technology intersection.
Yeah, Chad, and that's exactly what I'm saying. And what becomes even a greater component, particularly around leadership, is if leaders can transparently tell people up front, hey, this is probably not going to look like anything we do today. The value you're bringing to this is the brilliance, the organizational knowledge and information, and we need your help to help us evolve and be better. And on the other side of this, we really will be, you will be better because you will have been on the journey to really help us evolve. And it's a natural training ground. Now, I can't promise anything as a leader, but I will tell you the transparency of a leader sharing the vision that we're going to get better, we're going to get faster if that's the vision, we're going to deliver stronger and more accurately. And oh, by the way, we invite you on this journey. And here's what I know. So here's the period. Here, and we're going to ask you a lot of questions, and there's the question mark, and we're going to celebrate and course correct. It's an evolution. So it's not a moment.
Okay. Again, I think where a lot of, and again, I'm not knocking organizations, but I think a lot of organizations, when they go through this change, what they miss is that period.
Yes.
Because they go right into questions and say, okay, here's what our systems are currently doing now. What do we need them to do with this new system? And they're asking the questions, but they don't have maybe the people around the table in the right mindset. Because they missed the period. They weren't clear. They didn't set the right direction or get me in the right mental mindset to answer the questions in a way that it's forward thinking to the to be. And I'm still living in the as is. Is that fair, or did I read too much into that?
I think that is very fair. And you have to take several layers of leaders in your organization to the to the drinking hole. Quote unquote, to hear it. And you also have to give them a little time to digest and process. And you have to find the places and the spaces in your organization. So if you're in person or if you're virtual or hybrid environment, you have to take all of those into consideration in the evolution of the system, the culture, because that becomes part of the culture as you're building it with intention. And
Yeah.
it's easier said than done. You and I will talk about this. We can talk about this all day long.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easy, way easier said than done. But again, the question marks don't work as effectively if I don't do a good enough job in laying the foundation with the period, right? Creating that understanding, that clarity, that alignment of where it is we're going. If I do that the right way, it does create that tailwind. Back to my original question, when I come to question marks, and it makes the exclamation points more celebratory than worrying about shoring up our gaps.
And that
Okay.
leads us right into the tailwind, to be honest with you, because it's the lack of the period is, I'm sorry, a headwind. The lack of the period, as well as I think the lack of an open mind, which is opposite. I mean, opposite of the closed mind, which is the headwind.
Yeah.
And it's at every level. I will tell you, all my research says that the human natural way that we as humans function is that we're looking for consistency. We want to know what we can predict. We look for the weatherman with the most accuracy or weather person with the most accuracy because we want to be able to predict what's going to happen. You know what? The one thing I can predict, and I think you would echo this, Chad, is that change is going to happen. Change is going to happen in our lives, the world of work, our communities that we live in. It's going to happen. And so, as leaders in organizations, the more predictability that we can give is a tailwind for us, and the less clear that we are is a headwind for us, I think, in the organization. And I will go back and say that the period is not a one time thing.
Yeah.
The period is along the journey. So
Yeah. It threads.
yes,
It threads
it's
through.
a thread through it, absolutely. And that's why I think organizations need people like you and I, because we don't live in that world. We're not distracted by, I mean, we want to drive their P&L, but we're not in there driving the P&L. We're not in there driving the revenue. We're not in there trying to consider customer satisfaction. We're not in there trying to consider the delivery of the manufacturing operational process. We're not in there. We can think for and with organizations on how they can remember the period, how they can remember the question mark, how they can remember and embed that thread of celebration and learning through mistakes through their organization. So we like to think with them and for them to continue to evolve and uphold whatever their key mission is in their
Yeah.
organization.
You also said something. I don't know if you did it unconsciously, because I think it's just who you are as an individual. Maybe you did it intentionally. And you didn't necessarily explicitly say it, but I caught it. When you're creating the period, right? And again, it's an ongoing thing. You also showed up as a leader very authentic, saying, and you weren't manufacturing, like, everything's going to be perfect. It's going to be great. We're going to do all this stuff. You're not setting false expectations. You're setting real expectations to say, here's the reality. I can't guarantee anything. There's going to be I think leaders' brands would rise and go up so much if they would just create that authenticity and that honesty, not to scare anybody or not to, create negativity, but
Yes.
just that authenticity. I think people are looking for that. They're looking for somebody to raise their hand and go, I'm comfortable enough to tell you I'm not exactly for sure everything that's going to happen. I'm confident enough to tell you that we have a great team and we can figure this thing out,
Yes.
versus trying to set unrealistic expectations that, again, just create long-term headaches and more headwinds for people. Agree?
Yes. Agree. And that goes back to that credibility and trust. I will tell you, the leader that modeled that the most for me in my career, and it resonates and I think about it all. Ken Chenault was the CEO of American Express during 9/11. We lost 11 American Express employees during that tragedy. You want to talk about unplanned, never even thought of, just tragedy. He came to us within 24 hours across the nation or world, because it's a global
Yeah.
network, and really talked about what he knew and reassured us what he knew. And then he said, and we're going to be putting a plan together. And regularly he came to us as a workforce. And I'm sitting in North Carolina. I'm not in New York at the Trade Center. But I have 11 colleagues in the organization who have lost their lives. At some point, we understood that. We knew we had colleagues that lost their lives. But talk about a period of telling us what he knew, reassuring employees did not go back to the office for months after months that I was working with in New York.
Right.
I mean, and that was unexpected. So imagine the impact leaders can have when they know the change is coming.
Yeah.
When they know that there's going to be disruption in how people are thinking and change, and when they can tell people all that they know on a regular basis, status updates, seeking their feedback, and then celebration. So all of those things, when we know it's happening, is incredible. I think it can make an incredible impact. I know, not think, I know that it can make an incredible impact.
Yeah, you've seen it. And you've experienced it. You've seen it, you've experienced it, and you've helped organizations do it. Listen, like you mentioned, we could probably talk forever. I got 3 other things I want to get to before we kind of come down for a landing. So a lot of times in today's world, like you mentioned, there are a lot of pressures when you work inside an organization, big, small, profit, nonprofit.
Yep.
And the mid-level managers get squeezed. They just do. And a lot of times people are they throw their hands up and they really think that leadership just sucks.
Yes.
And that there's, they're trying to field the demands from above. They're trying to keep the troops satisfied on an everyday basis, and they just feel like there is no way out. You've given a lot of nuggets in the 30 minutes we've been talking, but in one answer, if you could speak to that population and give them hope or give them ideas, what would you say to that leader that is just kind of at their wits' end and saying, why did I even take this role? What would be a few David Letterman top 10 tips that you would think that might resonate with this group?
I had 10. I do think though, and because I've been in that spot, I think sitting down and truly writing down the answer to the question that you just asked, why am I even in this role? I think is important. One of the things I've always done though is had a list of 3 to 5 things that are requirements for me and the role that I sit in, from a world of work perspective. And I've even started to apply this into my volunteer and board work that I do. So those top 3 to 5, things for me are important because then I need to look at my role. And when I stepped into this role, it may have met that criteria, but it may not any longer meet that criteria. Like one of my things is I want flexibility in my work. I want some level of autonomy. So I used to work in a call center. And that call center, I was in HR at the call center, but I used to tell people, don't come work here if you want flexibility and autonomy, because we're going to tell you when to get on the phone, when to get off the phone, when to take your breaks, all of that, when you go into the bathroom, all of those things. So I knew, and on that list, I think you as leaders need to look at your top 5 list of what is important, 3 to 5 things. The next thing is, what are your priorities in life? And this gets a little deeper outside of work. And I never believe I'm talking to anybody who comes to work. I think I'm talking to the whole person. But what are your priorities? And I've had to do that. I mean, part of the reason why I stepped out of a role in the world of business is because I wanted to contribute at higher and different levels in a variety of ways. So when I thought about my priorities, that was one thing. I also needed to spend some more time with my family.
Mm-hmm.
So carving that time out was equally as important. And I wanted to figure out how I spent more time in the community, because in today's landscape, I think I can make a bigger impact. So I'm just giving you real life, raw examples of things that I'm doing. The last thing is I've partnered with a friend of mine of over 20 years in our podcast that we'll launch soon. And it's called Raw, Real Authentic Wisdom. And it's about lifing on every different aspect. So those are, and they're going to be real topics and they're going to be raw. So respectfully raw.
Yeah. No, I love it. What I gathered there is, number one, know kind of your why, right? What you're doing. Know your requirements. What are some of the things that you require, both in the role and outside the role, just kind of life in general?
Yep.
The other one that you didn't say, but I think it's there too, is having the courage to change.
Yes.
Right? I mean, having the courage, if it doesn't fit, you're not stuck. Like you mentioned, I think it was your uncle, right? Your uncle always says, Terri, you have options.
Yes,
There are choices.
yes,
And so just don't feel like, and I've talked to so many people that they're like, oh man, I don't like it here, but I only have 11 years left. I'm like, 11 years, that's an eternity. Like,
that's a long time.
and that mindset just gets them in that stuck mentality and they think there's no way out, but there always is a way out, right? Okay. Two more things and one more, and then we're going to get to, and you've already, again, touched on this, but you know, in your space and your role in HR, in change management, and looking at driving culture, and being the chief people officer, chief culture and people officer at Make-A-Wish before you made the transition, how a lot of time, I'm sure, just like a lot of other leaders, is that you spend most of your time looking in the window of how you can help everybody else and how you can help change and help these people and impact these people, and the board work that you do and the community, the work that you do. You're always looking outward. What do you do to kind of look in the mirror and make sure that your tank is full? What are some of the things you do to say, because it's hard to be at your best when you're not at your best, right? And if you're running on empty, it's hard to continuously show up and put that facade on. So how does kind of Terri stay sane in the work that you do?
That's a good question, and I'll sum it up. I'm a woman of faith, so I will tell you that my faith is the foundation of that. I have a 5-year-old Cavapoo, and we take long walks and we think hard. And she gets to hear, her name is Pretzel. She gets to hear some of the ideas out loud because I talk to her all the time. I had to get her because if I talk out loud, just walking by myself, people might look at me like I'm crazy. I'm
Yeah.
kidding. She was a COVID puppy, but she's been a wonderful addition to my thought and my mental wellness and my physical wellness. So that's it. My husband he is a great sounding board, so I use him quite a bit. I mean, meditation and prayer is a huge component for me as well. And we love travel. So really getting away, and we like to go places where there's no Wi-Fi, where we can just disconnect and, spend the time however we want to spend. And I also like doing independent trips where I'm just traveling and spending time with myself. So those are all things that I do
Okay.
that really kind of fuel my soul, my energy.
Okay, that's great. Now let's get on to the last topic, which is there are so many people out there that have dreams, goals, and aspirations, and a lot of times in those buckets are starting their own business,
Yep.
doing their own thing.
Yep.
And you went from the chief people and culture officer at Make-A-Wish. Now you're into this new chapter, leading folks and company, right? That's the name of the new. So talk to us about a couple things.
Yep.
One is. You mentioned earlier that one of your dreams was to always create your own destiny, be on your own. So now you're fulfilling that. What was the final kind of straw or whatever? I don't know exactly how to imagine. Like, what was the final kind of thing that said, okay, it's time, it's
Yep.
time,
Yep.
and then two. Talk to us about the new chapter because you're writing it, right? You're creating it, and so talk to us about what you're going through right now because it's so new. And then the third thing is so one is what was the final thing? Two is talk to us what you're going through right now, and then three, what's the vision? What do you want to accomplish? Take those in any order you want to take it, but I'm just curious on those things.
Yep. Quickly, the final straw was I stopped one day and I hadn't cooked dinner for my husband in 2 weeks. And I said, I'm out of balance. And so we had the conversation and we decided that now was the time. The new chapter has been, when I tell you soul filling, weightlifting, it has really created energy that I haven't felt in a long time.
Okay.
Now, there's a level of anxiety or, nervousness or whatever, but my faith keeps me grounded. I have had opportunities, even as much as talking to you, Chad, walk through my door and really open themselves up as opportunities. So, first of all, thank you to you. And there's probably been 6 or 7 other things that have just walked in as soon as I had the time and the availability to answer the emails, have the conversations. So, yep, some nervousness and anxiety. But by far, the energy and the vision has evolved. So, what is the focus? The focus is working with organizations, varying levels, it really doesn't matter to me the size. It's the
Mm-hmm.
impact that we can make. So I have community colleges on my radar and working with. I have medium level foundations. I have larger institutions that I'm having conversations with from a corporate perspective. The vision is really walking with these individuals, teams, leaders, groups, and really helping them understand some key concepts. So there's some group facilitation, there is individual coaching, and then there's some keynoting as it relates to, what the vision is and the impact I will make.
That's great. That's awesome. How do organizations, if they want to utilize your services, utilize keynotes or coaching or the entire suite of services, how do they find you?
So you mentioned I'm building, so I am. So
Yep.
email is the best way, and it's
Okay.
Terri, Terri, at leadingfolks.com. Note
Okay.
that folks is Foulks, Terri
Okay.
at leadingfolks.com. I'll be happy to talk to you and see what we can do.
That's awesome. I think they can also find you on LinkedIn too, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you
So
can find me on LinkedIn, and
there's LinkedIn, and then when when and if you get your website and other social media channels up, Terri, we're happy. I can certainly get the team on it. We're happy to help support and drive and create awareness around the brand, because I think there's not enough people in the space truly trying to drive impact. And the byproduct of that is success, in my opinion. You add enough value, you solve bigger problems. The byproduct is you're going to have success in whatever the definition of success is for you. And I think you're doing amazing work, and it's needed. It's just there's so many companies out there, so many CEOs, candidly, that are just admitting that they're making it up as they go. Like they just don't know. And again, not to knock any of them, but there's so many people that can leverage, your expertise, your experience, in the services that you bring, that I think that there's enough business for all of us out there.
yes, and I love the fact that you talk about success as you define it, and it's individual and corporate success. And as long as we can marry those two, so I can see what's in it for me and the organization, that's a recipe made for just a delicious success.
That's awesome. Well, Terri, listen, I appreciate your time. I'm interested to follow, and I will follow your story to see how 2026 evolves as
Yes,
you continuously grow.
yes.
And best of luck. I think there's so many nuggets in the 41 minutes that we've been chatting that, listeners, if you don't take anything away, it's your own fault. But best of luck. And again, keep doing the work that you're doing, because it's needed, and it certainly can drive impact and help people, again, set themselves up for a higher probability of success. So thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you, Tad. Lead on.
All right. We'll see you.
Bye bye.